give some this recording some flow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the California Small Farm Conference. My name is Evan Wigg. I'm with Community Alliance of Family Farmers, and we're very excited to have you guys here today for Transforming Rural Healthcare. I'm really excited about this workshop just because I think we as the farming community spend so much time focused on how to take care and tend to the earth and to our crops and to our animals, but not nearly enough time focused on tending to the health of ourselves and our communities. So this is an opportunity to do a little self-care, look at how we're taking care of the humans involved in agriculture. And we are really, really lucky to have such a wonderful panel today talking about what's possible for rural healthcare. So just want to encourage everybody to use the chat feature down below in your screen if you have any questions, comments, you want to interact. And with that, we've got a whole lot to dig into. So I'm going to pass the mic here, and thank you so much for being here at the California Small Farm Conference.
Excellent. Yeah. And, thank you, first of all, for all of you that are organizing this and making this be possible. That's really awesome. So thank you, CAF. Thank you, all the organizers, all the different the different people who funded this to make this possible. I really want to just acknowledge all of you. And before we get started, let me just invite everybody. I got one of these lovely bowls here. So let's all just take a moment and just maybe take a couple of breaths and just breathe and acknowledge the farmer within us, and the farmers in our ancestors that are still with us, and the farmers that will come to the future, and just, planting that seed of possibility. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. So I feel like now we brought some sacredness into the conversation, so we can get into some of the compost, right? But before we do that, I'm really grateful for all of the panelists that are here. And Bashwati, I'm glad. I'm of course we love to be with the people, but it's also nice to be up on stage too. So I'm glad we got on stage. And we're gonna start introducing everybody. But before we even get there, I'm really excited to have this conversation, particularly because I have noticed the challenges that rural communities face, spending time with farmers, spending time with farming communities, and just noticing how they're incredibly diverse, yet the diversity is not elevated and empowered. In fact, especially in the healthcare space, the diversity is not empowered. The richness of our cultural medicines is not empowered. And also the richness of how we also are all exploring, especially when you start working on a farm and you're in relation with nature, you start to recognize how much healing there is that nature can offer us. But we're really not exploring that as much in the healthcare spaces. So I'm really grateful that we have these panelists here, because in my opinion, you can go out in the world, you can find all these people that are like talking at TED Talks and they're talking at South by Southwest and everything, but they keep talking about the same things: telehealth, data metrics, blah, 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 blah. But then you have the people here in this conversation who are themselves practicing their own growth and self-development. They're actually working with patients. They're dealing with and connecting them to nature, and also connecting to nature themselves. So I'm really grateful to have panelists on this conversation that embody the kind of transformation of healthcare that all of our communities need, not just the rural ones, but all of them. So with that being said, I dropped in the chat a really fun game for us to play. So if you guys, feel free, make sure you switch the chat to everyone. I would like to encourage everyone to keep talking on the chat. Like, let's share. I have links that I'm going to be sharing throughout this conversation and dropping in the chat. So let's use this opportunity also for us to connect in different ways, dynamically connecting to each other, and also for us to also share information. And that's relevant and important for us to kind of move to a different place. This conversation, also, just sharing with all of you, we can spend a lot of time talking about what's wrong. And there's a lot of information about what's wrong. In fact, we'll probably share some of that stuff as well. But this conversation also, we're holding space for kind of like midwifing, right? We're kind of midwifing the possibility of healthcare too. So let's also imagine what this child could become. Let's spend time in this conversation, not just dwelling in what's wrong, but transforming. And just like compost, right? How we transmute compost into richness for the soil. Let's do that with this conversation with the current situations that we have. So thank you everybody for participating in that imagination and us problem solving in that way with stuff that really, it hurts us too. Because I mean, I'll admit, as somebody who likes to participate in the space of healing, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. So it feels really weighty, but we do it better together. When we're doing that in community, it's so much more potent. So that being said, I'm Indy Rishi Singh. I am the son of farmers from Punjab. I am a really, really proud Punjabi human being. Okay, as you can see my turban, and no matter what I do, I bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm. But at this moment, for me, it's a convergence of education, healthcare, and farming, agriculture. Like I feel, how can we support those three: the teachers, the healers, and the people who grow the food for us, right? And for me, everything I'm doing is in that triad. Everything I'm doing is around supporting the educators, the healers, and the farmers. And so that's kind of where I'm showing up. There's a lot you can look up for me and everything, blah 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 blah. But that's kind of why I'm framing this conversation. I'm gonna throw it over to the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves in that way. What do you do? What's your magic in the healthcare space? But also, why are you jumping into this conversation? Why are you in the hot seat? So, all right, I got this ball. All right, I got the, oh my God, Charlie, I'm gonna say poop ball. I got the poop ball. All right, poop is really important when we're, doing regenerative farming. So we've got a really healthy poop ball to put into the soil. Okay. All right, who's gonna go to? I'm gonna throw it over to Rosie. Oh my God, Rosie, you got the poop ball.
Oh my gosh. All right. I got it. I'm Rosie. I am a nurse practitioner and I believe in mind, body, spirit medicine, and definitely food is medicine, and being able to understand what we eat is just a reflection of how we feel. So empowering people to really connect to their food more.
Throw the poop ball. Throw the poop ball at somebody.
Oh, okay. Throwing the poop ball to Charlie.
Thank you, Rosie. I'm Dr. Trinh. I am a licensed acupuncturist. I am here, started in acupuncture about 5 years ago, but actually started in computer science. I was a gamer. I worked in that space, but I really found that my health was suffering. And so I actually did transition into health. And in that evolution, like I found that herbs and plants are really healing. And so this is why, like, I'm a big proponent to actually understanding our connection to the elements, to the earth, to farming, and really to sustain ourselves through this lifestyle that allows us to connect back to nature. So I'm really excited to be here to be sharing that convergence of healthcare with farming and with everybody here. So thank you very much, Indy, and I will throw it to John.
All right, got it. Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing us all here. My name is John Luce. I'm an osteopath, a pediatric rehab doctor in San Diego. I grew up in Texas and have family who is, a rural family practitioner, a PA, and an NP, all in the close family out in West Texas. Working closely with the community. An osteopath. We certainly prescribing medicines, but a lot of the medicine I prescribe as an osteopath and a physiatrist is is therapy, physical occupational speech therapy, talking about nutrition, exercise is medicine, food is medicine, and how can we incorporate some of those things, in our daily lives and in the lives of the folks that we engage with. Really happy to be here. So I'll pick up the ball and I'll toss it over to Dee.
Thank you. Oh, this ball is really energized. So I go by Dee. My name is Diana, or Diana. I respond to all, not attached. I am a registered nurse in California. And I am here because I believe that by healing the earth, we heal the people. And I really am inspired to connect with farming communities more. For the past year and a half, I've been on the Big Island of Hawaii, working with farmers, living on farms, and also exploring the rural healthcare crisis on that island. And really just inspired to participate and to observe and to be a steward as well, and to reconnect to the earth and to our cultural medicines as well. And how can we be a bridge to creating robust emergency services while also empowering people in remembering the medicine that is within. So that is why I'm here, and I'm going to pass the ball to Dr. Bashwati.
Thank you for this compost ball. If it's made of cow poop, it's a really great, we call it gobor, right? And this is like something that we use in India to make the sides of houses, and we use it as fuel, and we use this ball. So thank you so much for this fuel. My name is Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya, and I'm a physician scientist rediscovering my inner farmer roots. I was born in San Francisco, actually, but right now I am living in New York City at Weill Cornell Medical College. So I started my career as a pharmacologist, neuroscientist. So I was trained on how drugs affect the body. And that means not just the drugs that you see as pills, but any kind of substances, any molecules that affect the body. And from there, I decided to go to public health school. And I was very concerned about how these medicines, or I always thought those were the only medicines out there because that's how we're trained in, academic universities. So I decided to go to public health school, and I ended up doing medical missions around the world in many countries. And whether it was El Salvador, Tibet, or Singapore, or Ireland, I found that people would go to their traditional remedies when they got sick. And I kept thinking, why would they do that? Why don't they just use really good, those clean white pills that are, FDA approved? And people really went back to the earth when they got sick, at least the ones that were connected to their ancestral roots. So I started studying the medicines of the ancient traditions. And of course, you can imagine this is not a very popular thing to do. And right at the same time, I had just gotten into medical school. So I completed my MD on one side, while I was also studying what's called alternative medicines on the other side, looking at herbs, medicinal herbs especially, and hanging out with people at the NIH that did the work at the Office of Alternative Medicine, and going abroad and doing more medical missions with people who went out to the rural areas. And whether it was forest or mountain, people really believed in nature. And they kept saying, oh, well, if you need to heal, just go back to Mother Nature. And that is in such contrast with what I was learning in healthcare. So I was at the meccas in Boston, Chicago, New York of mainstream big medicine. And not only did they not go back to nature, they didn't feed us that way. So I found myself like wondering, where does my food actually come from? So after med school, I did become a hospital doctor, and I looked at how our food was, and I started lobbying for the change of food for patients to be something that is not preserved, kind of big farm, pesticide-filled food. And I started reading more about it, which is stuff they don't really want doctors to read. So my journey has been about, what are those foods? What are those molecules? What are those things that actually act as drugs, even though they claim that they're food or something else? And how does that impact the health of our patients? And then I started looking at what rural farmers do, because I actually did spend 10 years of my life in Murdoch, Nebraska, I went to Ralston High School in Nebraska. And so I'm really in tune with the way that the farmers thought about keeping their small farms. And so when I was invited to this conference, you know, something inside of me really resonated with the fact that we need to stand up for those people who just stay quiet on the land. And we need to really talk about the issues, whether they are the migrant workers' own healthcare issues, or whether it's the issues of healthcare of people in big cities who absolutely don't know about their food and where health comes from, which is, you know, our bread baskets, our farmers. So I'm still a practicing physician, and I went back mid-career and studied Ayurveda. And we'll talk more about that, because I really find that Ayurveda is a great mix of using medicines and healthcare with the attitude that we have toward our own, what we would call seed to stomach. So from what we grow to what grows inside of us. Happy to be here.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And just hearing all of your angles and different perspectives, it's beautiful. And there's so many more perspectives that, you know, I know some of the people in the chat have valuable perspectives, and there's so many more that are not even in this conversation right now. And I feel like what a wonderful time we have. I feel when systems are collapsing, or when they're kind of dissolving, when they're not as strong as they were before, it's also an opportunity to build new systems, right? What's that quote, D, by Buckminster Fuller? What is it? D?
Basically, you know, stop trying to fix the broken system and just build the alternative.
Yeah, yeah. And alternative, we say, it's like funny you're saying alternative, but like actually, like Bashwati is saying, and even Charlie, like these things have been older, right? Ayurveda is one of the oldest medicines in the world. There's research and science. That's a scientific medicine. It's not something just woo-woo, right? And Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, also has really, really deep sense of science and scientific method being used, right, and practiced. And so really important for us to start to integrate these ideas and philosophies. But I'm curious, you know, as we navigate this conversation, I do want to hold space for all of you. You know, as one of the questions dropped in the chat was, what are some of the simple practices that farmers and farming communities can practice to improve their health right now? Like, what are some things that are really simple that we can offer the small farm conference community? And the people here, some of the people in the chat are not even in California. They're in other farming communities around the country. What ideas you guys have? Popcorn, whatever you guys want to just jump in on the mic. Anything, any simple things that people can do and practice that can support them? Who wants to go? Don't make me pick you.
For me, I'm a big proponent actually just understanding the basic 4 elements that we talk about, right? Because we sometimes forget that like everything's based on those elements. And so when our life becomes very complicated, we forget that just going back to the simple, like, how's your water? How's your earth, which is your soil? You know, how's the air that you're breathing? Because I'm sure in the farm where there's a lot more plants and trees, the air quality is much better. But, you know, but then there's like, now we have machines that spew all these, you know, carbon dioxide emissions, even in farms, right? And so those are really important to just remember that, like, even at a farm space, like, where are all these 4 elements and how are they really supporting our lifestyles?
Something
I
I
really
know.
like.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna quickly say that, you know, after spending quite a bit of time with farmers and recognizing that they are healers themselves, and you know, with that comes a lot of overextending, a lot of giving, a lot of burnout, and the lack of they're feeling very under-resourced themselves. And so, you know, collective care, self-care, these things that we don't think of, and when we are caring for others or caring for the earth, and to me, for farmers, that comes in the form of community. That the community really needs to step up and support the health of the farmers, and you know, body work, showing like, what do you need, how can I serve you, and really asking how to be of service to the farmers. So really cultivating communities that are tapped in and understand and can support you.
I can add to that, how helping people to learn what we call home remedies. There's so much stuff that we can take care of ourselves if we know what to do. So, you know, when you get a burn, let's say you're cooking, the best thing you can do is put a raw potato on it and not some chemical ointment. There's so many home remedies that were known. I want to also give a shout out to the Native American community of the United States and Canada, because we walk around as immigrants thinking that it's our land and we don't even know the plants that are on it. But the people that we immigrants killed, in genocide 200, 300, 150 years ago, they knew the plants. They could walk around. So this wasn't foraging. This was understanding the nature around them and using those plants as medicine, as a part of everyday life. And when we rediscover that and we say, oh, look, there's this thing that's growing in my backyard, and oh, it's medicinal. Isn't that amazing? This was absolutely basic knowledge for Native Americans, and for us to at least acknowledge their part in knowing the land and giving back the respect that we did not give them for the last 300, 400 years. The other kind of Indian, not this kind of Indian, the Native Americans. I just feel that that's absent in our healthcare system today when we talk about herbs and home remedies. Just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, I love all those points that everyone's made so far, for sure. I think as a farmer, there's a lot of repetitive actions, and you can be injured by all these repetitive actions and doing the same things over and over. And like, for example, here I am sitting. I sit a lot. A lot of us sit. If you're in a tractor, you're sitting. Your hips are flexed. That muscle goes and attaches onto the kind of the base of your spine. So we've got to stretch some of those things out. You've kind of got to do the opposite motion to get things moving, so you can help yourself for your own longevity and your own comfort. And so I think, on a day-to-day basis, sort of helping prevent some of those overuse things by taking a break, and knowing farmers, I know that sometimes taking a break is not the thing that you all are looking to do, but, just taking a few minutes to kind of disrupt the routine to help yourself can be very, rewarding and empowering, and help with your own longevity and your own comfort.
Thanks, John. Rose, you got something?
Well, I mean, I guess my perspective coming from a family practice is just making sure that you're taking care of your own health and understanding like the shadows that you don't see, like your blood pressure and your labs, and just understanding if things are within normal limits, like your blood pressure, for example, or if your blood pressure is creeping up too high, or your labs, like if your cholesterol is too high, or other little things. So I think just learning to take care of yourself, even in the Western world, and then trickling in other things too. So I know my grandpa was a farmer, and my grandma was a rural nurse. And I know that he just didn't take care of himself in the way that I see others do, because it's hard when you're so used to taking care of other people all the time. So I think just coming back to nurture yourself and understand your baseline and kind of where you want to go.
Very well said. And go ahead, Dee. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, maybe this kind of segues into some of the current issues. I mean, and I love this question because it is really layered, but a lot of the farmers, I mean, especially here in California, if we're talking about migrant farming communities, are disproportionately exposed to toxic pesticides and chemicals, right? Therefore, putting them at risk for really preventable diseases and things that cancers, like it's just, if we, and to me, that's like, now we're talking like at a policy level, like what can we do as a surrounding community to ensure that we are getting rid of these pesticides, these toxic chemicals in farming and farming use. And not only is that impacting the farmers who are stewarding the land, but we're also consuming that food, right? Because that food is going out to the greater community. So really understanding what is in our food, and what are we consuming. I'm just glancing at the chat, and Benjamin has brought a really great point into this conversation around mental health. And that we know farmers have one of the highest suicide rates among any profession. I think doctors might be number 2. And so, we are in a mental health crisis. And so I would love to hear everyone's perspectives on that. And maybe even some of the farmers in the audience would like to share some experiences. But Benjamin says mental health is a key element, especially year after year of continued work, and often get unrecognized. What are some of the best mental health practices or suggestions?
I mean, to answer that question, I mean, this is one of the reasons why there was an intention to create this conversation and create this ongoing conversation. The intention is this, it doesn't end here, right? We're going to continue this conversation. And for me, I've noticed that the most potent mental health remedy is community, especially a collaborative caring community, right? Something that's collaborative, something that's caring, something that is sharing the work, sharing the resources, sharing the love, sharing the music, sharing the food. All of a sudden, like, just no matter where you go in the world, you go in the most poor areas in the world. And where my family's from, it's a farming village and they're really poor, but they're really happy and they're pretty dang healthy too, right? And so what's going on there? It's because there's a really strong community. And so for us, even as some of us are not even living in the rural areas, some of us are, how can we start to build stronger communities where there is more intentional collaborative care within those communities, more intentionally collaborating and spending time with each other, spending time with the farmers, spending time with the people who are growing the food and the farming communities, some of them who might not even speak English. Can we create bridges for them so that we can communicate with them? I mean, I can still play the flute. I don't have to speak the same language to play music with people, right? And that sometimes is medicine. So does anybody have any other stuff along that line?
Oh,
I
I like
really
to add, you're saying the
go ahead.
flute. Sorry. The
Go
idea of actually just music and sound vibration, like they have shown scientifically, like actually plants and roots and mycelial network really do connect. And so when we are in the farms, you're already connected to the greens, but what's missing is the vibration. Even the birds, right? Hearing the birds, and they actually are singing with nature. There's correlation that birds are singing to activate the plants in the morning for them to pick up more water. So for us, like many traditions, we actually used to sing when we used to farm, right? Like in Asia, we used to sing when we do the rice farming. I know many indigenous cultures, they have drum circles where they're all connecting, and just the music. It's, maybe sometimes that language puts us in a position that adds the mental illness, because mental is in the language concept of the mind, right? But maybe playing with music puts us into the heart space where we're connecting to each other in the heart space, and not into the mental mind, which is, again, we all feel like the burnout is really where we're really pushing our mind to do things that maybe it was not meant to. So I feel like music is very important to building that community and that connection.
It's really great. And I love the idea of music. There's a company in California called Remo Drums where they will come in with doctors and actually have them take their pulse beforehand and blood pressure, and then drum together, and then they'll take their blood pressure and afterwards. And they've shown doctors, look, this actually works. Here's the phenomenon in your language, what you think is important, which are these body measures, biofeedback. And so I love what you just said, Dr. Charlie. I was gonna say kind of some nerdy things. One is about the clock genes and living your lifestyle so that those biochemical DNA and the way they unfold in your body, especially in your brain, are connected to the factory of your body's the proteins and the way that the DNA work. And there's been a lot of study that shows that actually affects the mind gut, which is you're finding one of the big places where people's mental health molecules come from and are interconnected. Things that are a little bit less nerdy are this phenomenon called earthing, getting your feet out into the soil in nature. There's apparently a vibration on the earth, and if you garden in, barefoot, it actually connects you to the earth and has been shown to improve your mental health. And in Japan, there's a phenomenon called Shinrin-yoku, which many of you know of. It's called forest walking. So it's about being in the deep forest and taking in not just the energy and not just like the oxygen that trees give off, but the energy of that. And spending time in nature is obviously something that many farmers do. But what I find is that the rural farmers who are struggling are really trying to emulate big farmers, and wearing big boots and having like wariness of pesticides and stuff. Well, what about the small farmer who does garden barefoot, who wants to get earthworms under her feet, or who wants to connect? There's actually something biochemically going on to heal you when your feet are picking up that drone of the earth. And let's not forget that and use that for our mental health. The studies are there. It's just that like doctors are not going to, promote that because we walk around with shoes on all day.
I think someone in the chat mentioned something I think really valuable, and a gap that I noticed in a lot of farmers' lives was massage and touch, and the need for that physical kind of manipulation by someone else, and just that energy exchange. And I know Dr. John does this a lot with his patients and his community, and has worked a lot in the farming community in I think Madeira. Was that right, Dr. John? But the need for massage, the need for physical kind of manipulation, for stretching, being like hunched over in the ground. I see a lot of farmers that are really tight up here and really just kind of need to that support in relaxing. So definitely body work is something and that's where that community piece comes in as well too, right? Like having a community that can somebody that does that can step in and support the farmers in that way.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's interesting. I'm noticing some conversations in the chat. I love that we're starting at the small picture, right? Like focusing on the individuals. Like it's important that we recognize the individuals that are growing our food, the individual communities that are participating in this way. And so giving individual tools is valuable. But then I think it was Gideon brought up, oh, we need to interact with a modern healthcare system. That's what exists. Okay, yes, but now we're talking about systems level. And yeah, maybe let's transition this conversation. So we planted some seeds for the individual care. But now let's transition. Like, how can we start to imagine into developing a new system that works, that still integrates with the modern healthcare system, right? But like, how can we start bridging those spaces? Like, what would that look like? What would a robust farm-based healthcare system or healthcare clinic system, what would it embody? What would it be like? What is that bridge that we could build with the existing healthcare facilities? Because they're not in the rural communities. So what do you guys imagine as physicians and as people who are healthcare professionals?
Yeah, so kind of that and piggybacking on some other ideas, and burnout is real. And I have felt burnout and been too busy and sort of got into the rut of just doing my thing over and over and over. But how do you come together and talk with like-minded people that might have similar things, that might wake up really early and work very hard all the time, 7 days a week, and can be connected to what you're doing, but maybe disconnected from other things? How can you kind of circle back and, get a group together, in person would be ideal, right? But I would imagine that lots of folks live in different places, and, how can this group even, have an email chain or something, or a get together where we can say, hey, let's talk about some of these things that we're struggling with. Mental health is, when that's impacted, it affects everything. And it can be hard to talk, but if you have a group that you can talk with, or even just listen to, if you don't feel comfortable talking, it can be very empowering. And it might be something that we could kind of springboard off into the future about how can we even get this group and expand it to talk about some of the similar problems we might face or think about.
Anyone else? Systems thinking is interesting, right? It's we have to kind of get into the liminal space because there aren't many examples. I know there's Ethos Farm. Maybe Dee, you can share that in the chat. There are currently some examples out there where there are clinics on farms where they are giving patients food as medicine. Like they're administering food before they give them drugs. They're administering ideas around exercise before they're giving them medications. So that's happening in other parts of the country, but not in California. Or maybe there is, and maybe we just don't know about it, and people can share in the chat. But what could that, where we need to kind of lean into that liminal space. And it's uncomfortable. The liminal space is uncomfortable because it doesn't exist. And you kind of got to be a little creative and a little imaginative, which is kind of, a lot of us are scared about it. We like knowing, staying where we're comfortable. But the comfortable is not comfortable if our food has pesticides, if it's causing cancer, and all of us, if all of our food is causing us cancer, we kind of need to do something. It's kind of urgent for us to be creative and imaginative and liminal. So curiously for the panelists here, and even the people in the chat, what are some ways that we can start to co-create a rural health medical community? What would that be like, or how do we engage that?
One thing that comes to mind for myself, if we're looking at the problems that, I mean, are documented, we have a burnout crisis among not only farmers, also among nurses and doctors, right? So how are we supporting the health of those individuals that are supposed to be caring for the community? Number one. Some of those things some of the things that are being done are in the community in California may look like expanding telehealth or which to me I feel like is problematic, because then we're also getting away from that connection that you should have with the person that's caring for you. But it can be convenient for some people as well. And then also loan reimbursement, support for housing, support. So what does a community look like for me on a farm is a holistic integrative clinic where there is different modalities of healing. You have specialty practitioners that are there, so that way you're not relying on having to go into a big city to receive specialty services, which is a huge thing in rural communities, and really focusing on not just preventative health, but actually how do those communities get supported when their patients are healthy, rather than this fee-for-service system that we have in healthcare. And so yes, giving food that's grown from the land, having education for patients and also practitioners, because we also have to remember that we come from the system, this academic, like Dr. Bahaswati was sharing. We don't learn this in medical training, nursing training. So how do we bridge education around herbs and traditional medicines and food as medicine, so that practitioners can embody health and therefore be able to care for others?
Yeah, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but University of California does have a small farms network project. I think it's out of Santa Clara, and they actually give out grants. They have community education. I guess you could look up University of California and small farms and see if you can find it. So, and they might be even at this conference, right? I would defer to someone who's maybe at CAF or someone that, can talk about that. But there are resources that are increasing around small farms and the importance of small farms. One of the things that was tried, I actually helped on this grant when I was in my international health avatar. In India, they said, okay, every medical doctor, before they can get their license, has to spend 6 months working out in a rural area. So that established a place for rural healthcare clinics, around the farms. And it also educated the doctors that, the people in the rural areas, what kind of healthcare issues do they have? And the students who would come to medical school from rural areas were really smart because they'd grown up around this. So they did that for a while. Pharmaceutical companies came into India. I think this was like 20 years ago, and said, well, we don't need to let them have that much experience. They don't need to do it for so long. Let's just give them like 1 month. But I think today still in India, they have a mandate for doctors to work on farms. And so I was thinking, what would have happened if my medical students at Cornell had a month of, a small farm, what should we call it? Not an internship, but even like a rotation where they had to work out there. How would that be? So I went to Cornell's family medicine doctors, and a big shout out to them, because several of them said, we would love to have this as a rotation for our medical students so they can learn what the issues are. Yeah, and it would just be a way, you know, medical students are kind of slaves, right? When we were medical students. So there's not a lot of funding that's required. It's more giving them that experience and putting it into the curriculum of a medical school. What would it look like if University of California were told, hey, let's do that? And, you know, provide those clinics. And even if it's just one day a week, hey, at least people have access to that, right? So these kind of ideas are there, they're cropping up, and we're going to be trying to do that in my farm in New Jersey, Veda Farms, with Cornell and with Rutgers and with, you know, other groups around the area that want to give that kind of education. So I don't know if University of California already has that and could look at that more seriously. Also, there's some really great stuff in the chat, the naturopathic groups that are providing that kind of healthcare. Homeopathy is one of the most useful and inexpensive forms of healthcare. So for those of you guys who I'm certified in health in homeopathy as one of my integrative physician modalities, but to use that perspective that homeopathy boosts your immunity, like that's really good healthcare, and it's cheap and it's self-empowering.
Yeah, I'd like to add
Yeah.
to the idea of systems too, is actually thinking about how things built around systems, right? Actually, if you look at cities, people live around grocery stores. That means they live around their food source. And so what's happened is the system wants us to go into places where we have food, right? Ironically, the farms are the ones providing that. And so actually, by thinking about a whole new system that actually takes away the whole concept of, you know, trying to go into another system to tell everybody how your system doesn't work, how do we actually say, hey, the farm is a new grocery store? And how do we then consider, because a lot of people are actually moving out now. There's a huge exodus of people moving out from cities now, right? But if they're actually congregating around farms, how do we then say, hey, there's different modalities of people coming in together? Because even at healthcare, like we are also showing up where people are. And if there's not a lot of people in rural areas, it's really hard for us to support ourselves, right? But the idea that as the exodus of people leaving cities, if they are going to rural places, they are going to congregate around farms, right? And so it's this idea that how do we actually support farms again to create a system that allows them to be the source of food instead of going to these grocery stores that have outsourced farms and don't really give back the value to farms, right? So I think it's really interesting that if we start from scratch, actually, our ability to create a system will be more potent than having to kind of pull these piecewise systems out and try and like tweak it so that it works for farmers. How do we just all go in full on, you know, all in with farmers and say, hey, we're here. How do we build a system around you? You know, it's not just farmers, it's not just healthcare, you know, artists, musicians, anybody who's willing to, you know, be around close to their farm, the food, the animals, I think will really consider allowing us to change systems much quickly.
John.
Yeah, so kind of want to tie a couple of points together that, I mean, Dr. Bhaswati has obviously gone way further than most, you know, traditional physicians would go in learning and all of these things. And, you know, my experience even in osteopathic school where we are about, oh, you know, your, you know, structure and function are interrelated and your body has these inherent healing properties and, you know, we're more holistic. My experience in medical school, you know, almost 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, was that there was one nutrition class. It was something like 8 sessions. And then it's, oh, that is all the nutrition that you need to learn. So, you know, I you know, certainly not to the level of Dr. Bhaswati, but, you know, I took some other courses to learn things and learn about lifestyle medicine. But, you know, most physicians out there aren't learning these things. And I also understand that physicians can sometimes be very ego driven, but, you know, in smaller communities, I would imagine that, you know, there's in smaller communities, like I personally would feel, I would love to be involved with, you know, the farmers. The farmers have so much to teach us, and they are the ones who are on the land. They're the ones who are doing things. There's the ones that know, you know, what is fresh at different times right now, local. And so, you know, I just want to hope to empower some of you all to sort of reach out to your local, you know, providers. And, you know, again, speaking about community, like how can we come together to learn from each other? You know, how can you teach us, the medical folks, so that we can then teach our patients, you know, and how can we kind of all come in this together, you know, again, building community, building growth, and kind of bringing it back to, you know, to our own community. And then kind of, I think it was Lisa, a dietitian in the chat, was making some points that, a lot of old school MDs and, new school and DOs and the whole crew, really don't fully understand. I think Lisa made the point about cancers and things from, from big ag and things like this. But I practiced in Madera and Fresno for 5 years in a children's hospital. And I can tell you that the sickest kids I have seen collectively were there in the Fresno Madera area in the Central Valley. Some of these young kids were just getting so incredibly sick with respiratory illnesses and the worst asthma I have ever seen. Kids on ventilators, had to be intubated, incredibly sick. Part of it is, the influx of things from LA and stuff getting caught in the valley and the ag and stuff coming up and the so maybe chemicals used. I mean, it's multifactorial, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot that us physicians don't know. There's a lot that we can learn from you guys. And I would just love to empower you all to kind of help us to learn what we can do to help the community.
Beautiful, John. And, that's a good segue. This time check too. This is an awesome conversation. Time has already passed. We've got 30 more minutes. And I wanted us to kind of, you brought up a really important point. It's just something that's been coming up in a lot of different spaces I'm involved with. We ended up showing the Common Ground documentary on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we showed that documentary and we had conversations around it, inviting local policymakers, inviting local industrial farmers, some of the biggest farmers on the island. And there was this really it was a reckoning. A lot of the big time farmers just will not admit the harms of the pesticides. And it's just, there's so much scientific proof. There's lawsuits, lawsuits. I mean, it's kind of crazy at this point. But right now, we kind of need we need support from the medical and the healthcare community. There needs to be a little bit more of a, it's for the children. I mean, we do so many things for kids, right? We go to war because of what happens to kids, right? So how about us going to war for not war, maybe how about us going to peace with nature and for farmers, because the farming communities and the children are being harmed the most right now. The children are suffering unnecessarily because of pesticides that should be illegal. Right. And I shared a link in the chat. I'll share a couple more links about how this problem is actually getting worse because they're kind of doubling down, the pesticide companies. So actually the healthcare community has a lot of power to do stuff in this space if they rallied around this cause, because it's not political. It's not polar. It's not a polarizing subject. It's actually just fact and science. So I'm curious to drop that with the panelists here. What are your guys' feelings about that? How can us leaning into food as medicine create a movement that isn't just anti-pesticides, but can also create something that is more positive or something that's more on the other side of anti-pesticides, and how that would relate?
I would love to start talking to kids, having kids in primary school learn about, I remember we had these egg cardboard containers and we brought in soil. We had to bring in soil from our own home. So we learned how to dig soil. And then we had to plant, I don't remember what they gave us. And then every day we had to water it. And I remember when the plant first burst up, there's this thing for little kids when they see, their efforts, bare green and there's something growing there. And when kids get interested, then maybe that's one of the reasons I've stayed interested, is because I have that in my awareness. I meet kids where if you ask them where peanuts come from, they say from the peanut factory. They don't know even what a peanut tree looks like, or, not the tree, but the bush thing. So there's a lot of awareness that needs to start from a very young age. And then those kids go back to their parents and they kind of retro educate the parents. And I think that would be a positive way to get started.
I like to mention that the people have the power. We pay, right, with our money. And I think in the conversation of even in as a doctor, I actually learn more from my patients, right? And so it's understanding that patients also have the power to tell healthcare professionals, hey, we don't approve, we don't appreciate this. Like, there's a lot more patients that there are doctors, and having to the process of like retrain people. It's like maybe suddenly all their patients go, no, we don't appreciate this. This is what we want to do, because I think that's really going to help us shift as a community, right? Because this is a global conversation. This is no longer, because this, all these big ag, big pharma, it's spreading across the planet. It's no longer a boundary thing. It's affecting everybody, because then all this goes into the water, then affects all these different communities, really. And so really our power is like, we don't need, high ranking anybody. Actually, the everyday person, the more of us gathering together, showing up at farms, the more we'll see that there's a shift that's happening. And we're already feeling it, right? A lot of us, that's why we're having these conversations. That's why this is going so well right now, because a lot of people are starting to really consider, hey, there is an alternative conversation, or what we consider ancient knowledge that is considered new again, right? So it's very exciting to see that we do and are seeing a lot more shift, because the regular people, right, are actually forcing the system to change.
Thank you, Dr. Charlie, for bringing that into the space around people power, because I think we can also look at the past, almost 4 years now, and the way that things were handled, and where does are we in a better place than we were in 2020 before COVID? Are we healthier? Are we more connected? Are we feeling so asking these questions, and also recognizing that the decisions that were made that impacted all of our lives were made by politicians and by public health officials who are disconnected from patients, from their communities. And so we really are at a time that requires us to get involved and to really show up in our local communities. And that doesn't mean, also when it comes to farmers, this is also an issue that we saw too, right? Farmers are farming all day. And so a lot of the times these, city council meetings, and they're not accessible to the people, right? So how can we form coalitions that support, like, hey, okay, you don't need to show up. I'm gonna go represent, but we're coming with one voice. We're coming organized. And so how can we get back to these grassroots type of organizing that supports what farmers and communities need, all of us need, and that in the cities as well, right? So really taking power back, people power back in this way. And I think that this is the time, because we can look again at the last 3 years and see like who was harmed the most by these policies that were really forced upon all of us, especially here in California, right? Farmers, children, healthcare workers, all the people, teachers, all of the people who are necessary to these communities were impacted the most detrimentally, and also historically marginalized communities as well. So what are we doing to bring the people power back?
Rosie, I feel you were going to say something too.
Well, I was just kind of like piggybacking off of that. It's like, okay, well, what can we imagine actually doing in small actionable steps moving forward, instead of having like the big dream? And what came through was, I saw someone put farm tours, and I made me think of when I was little. I used to spend the summers with my grandparents, and my grandpa was a farmer, and he would be so excited taking me out to like show me his strawberries because they were delicious, and show me his tomatoes. And like those memories are engraved in me, and I just like, I appreciate it now so much more because he's passed. And now I'm kind of getting my own green thumb, like wanting to learn how to make my own tomatoes, wanting to learn how to like, I'm trying to do basil right now, and then some microgreens. So it's like, how can we spark inspiration in other people just by providing education and a safe space to learn, but also having the space to expand? So like for me, that would be able to offer someone at a farm like just information regarding around like mental health. Like we could do a sound bath, a meditation, like a local community gathering to get people kind of grounded and settled for this energy exchange of, okay, let's just do like a trade share, like teach me how to grow these microgreens and I'll lead a class. Or like we can talk about other things like, family health or mental health, just like little different topics, and really being able to take these small actionable steps moving forward.
Dr. Bashwati, you're gonna say something? I could feel it. No? You're
Oh,
good?
well, yeah, I mean, I think I've said a lot.
We can listen. I feel like I could listen to all of you all day long. You know, that's one of the reasons why you're here. You have so much to offer.
You know, what we really need to do is get the politicians aware, and the normal people, like the citizens, oftentimes they need role models. So whether they're sports figures or, you know, Hollywood actors or I don't know, maybe sometimes legislators are kind of popular. If when they speak this stuff, it's going to make an impact. We all know the people that are not wanting us to talk about small farms. I think we haven't really discussed why they have so much power. It's not just money, it's the influence over the legislators. And I think there are a lot of legislators who remain ignorant to these kind of perspectives that we're bringing up today. And there is a place where we can find those people who maybe aren't our favorite, but still, you know, take the time to educate them about the importance of small farmers' health, whether we're talking about the farmer himself, herself, who is having mental health issues and depression and anxiety because they're struggling to keep their farm going. And this is not just a casual, like, you know, vegetable patch like my mom did in the backyard, but it's their livelihood. And those mental health issues are really serious. In Northwest New Jersey, the communities are just shutting down, and a lot of people have gone out of business during COVID times, and it's really, really depressing to see how desperate they are for solutions. And so when I show up on the farm, I have all these people that they don't want to come into the city, into Manhattan. They just want someone to come out to them and help teach them. There's also a bunch of migrant workers who have their own fears because, you know, they're supposed to be invisible and they don't count, they don't exist, but they still need healthcare. They still need people to help them with their, you know, woes, their health woes that they have no idea where it came from. They're not medical doctors. They don't have, first of all, it's not that allopathic medical truths are really true. Several of us have been in the mainstream medical system when we know that we were taught this, but clinically it doesn't really apply. We also know that there are remedies that are outside of those prescription drugs, which are so expensive, that are even more effective, which is, you know, some of the stuff we've mentioned in other modalities. But there needs to be a group of people that are advocating for such concerns. And I feel like if there was someone in this whole conference that could find some champions, that's probably the best word that's used in the marketing, you know, parlance, and in California, like, make a campaign for that. I would love to see TikTok videos. I've actually found a few where they're just little small farming hints and things you can do as a small farmer. And I would rather watch those TikTok videos than how to apply lipstick or, you know, the things that are a little bit less nature friendly. Maybe we need to start at that level to kind of capture the populace and then get it to the legislators and have people go to the legislators. Hey, you need to be representing the people, right? And not just the big pharma interest, big farm and big pharma interest. Okay, that's my 2 cents. What do you guys think?
I think Dee said it well in the chat that there's champions in this chat, and within nowadays it's not just 6 degrees. We're even like 2 to 3 degrees away from people who are influential, all of us. And maybe it is about us being really concrete and having a really strong crystallization of where we're trying to go. The other day I was leaning into the, you know, Dee and I were talking about this thing of hey, like the problem with insurance right now is it's based in greed. So if we wanted to create an insurance model that supports rural healthcare and rural communities, and just all of our communities, if we want to create an insurance system, it's got to be the opposite of greedy. So what would a not greedy insurance system be like? For me to even get there, to get to that concept, we kind of need all of the healers, not just your certified medical MD healers, but the healers that are yoga teachers, the healers that are Ayurvedic practitioners, the healers that are homeopaths, the healers who are teachers, the healers who are cooks. They just cook really good food and healthy food, and that's part of their healing modality. We need all these different types of healers to start actually leaning in, not from a greed point of view, but actually how can we show up at these farming communities? How can we show up to the migrant communities that might not have a voice? And let's just offer our gifts, our healing gifts. And maybe from that, just showing up with regularity and showing up with community and network, that can create a new insurance system that is based actually in service, not in greed. Because how do you create a not greedy system? You got to be of service. But are we doing that out of service? And one last thing I'll pin on that is I just heard this recently that the best way to move a system these days, if you want to really move a system, is you use the church system. And a lot of church systems have been used corruptly, right? To install systems, that are corrupt or maybe abusive. But it can be the opposite. There's church communities are very strong, right? Especially in rural communities, they're really strong, the church communities. How can we start showing up in those church communities to offer our services of healing to those communities, right? What if that's the channel and the passage? And what if they are also the champions? The church community itself becomes a champion of a new type of healthcare that is holistic and diverse and inclusive. So I'm throwing that out. That was a throw out there, but anybody want to add or spin off of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because insurance actually are based on the idea that you would get sick, right? They bet on you getting sick. And so actually the whole system is flawed because they wait until you get sick versus actually in Chinese medicine, they say a good doctor doesn't let their patients get sick. Otherwise, you're not a good doctor. You let them get sick, right? And so this idea that we should be doing preventative care, right? And so this concept of like, we don't culturally have preventative care. I think preventative care is not really an idea. It's been much more recently talked about now, but even then, like, we don't really talk about ways to keep ourselves from, getting that, like immune system. Like for some reason, the immune system has gone so many different ways, yet it's just simple as like, how do we sustain our own health so that we don't get sick, right? Because what happened is when we get sick, we then kind of spin in a really bad space where, we're limited to what we can do because we're either have to go into the insurance or the medical system. And then the idea that farmers have to pay a lot because they have to go into the cities sometimes to go and get medical insurance, right? So it's, because in Chinese medicine, like our medicine was for farmers, right? Because like at the time, right, the class systems, right? It wasn't the ones who were rich who were getting medical support. It was actually the farmers who were getting medical support. And so a lot of our own doctors were just actually managing people who were farmers, right? Who were working on the land. Because today there's a lot more people in the cities not working on the land, but back in the days where our medicine comes from, everybody was a farmer. So it's just this idea like, how do we pay attention to our own health, knowing who we are as humans and what we need to support ourselves so that we prevent ourselves from having these diseases, right?
One of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, and then also I can't remember who also mentioned it in the chat, is that we're starting to see in rural communities is this value-based care, which is again moving away from fee-for-service, and it's really only, and it's focused on basically healthcare providers earning money based on the results they deliver to their patients and the quality that they offer. And so it's interesting that this is kind of happening because of it's being forced to happen just because the actual resources aren't there. But that's, interesting to think about when we look at different models that are fundamentally different models of exchange and the way that doctors are incentivized to support. And through these different models, this may force doctors to step outside, like Dr. John was saying, how they don't have the education, they don't have the basic knowledge and understanding of food as medicine, as herbs, connection to the land, spiritual connection. I mean, we haven't even talked about the lack of spiritual connection in our healthcare system. It's completely non-existent. And we are spiritual beings. Like, how can we provide and care for each other when we are lacking connection to spirit, connection to the earth? So that's also, very woo-woo and people don't really understand, but, we'll see when everyone has their so-called come to Jesus moment in their life, who are you crying to, right? So, I mean, I'm just saying that that's also another thing that really needs to be integrated in health, because again, similar to what was talked about here, like where are people finding and going to for mental health? They're going to their faith-based organizations. They're going to like, so it's really important that that is integrated as well. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent about that, but I was talking about value-based healthcare and versus fee-for-service and the need to integrate spirituality in this.
Oh yeah, that was great. I mean, I think bringing it back to spirit is really important. I mean, for us to acknowledge that, you know, even for the farmers, right? Like I've noticed that the farmers that are healthy have a really deep relationship with the spirit in nature. And so they're not looking at nature extractively, they're looking at it abundantly. And so, and then the nature responds abundantly, right, as well. So maybe that's also a part of the economic drivers that are kind of making it tough, like Bashwati shared. It's yeah, there are economic situations. There's economic insecurity that's created for small farmers. But how can a spiritual movement, a spiritual reframing of from scarcity mindset to abundance mindset, how can that start to also affect the mental health of the farmers? How can it also start to affect collaboration and integration of support and help? Because some farmers I've met too, they just can't get good help, right? But it's not about getting good help. It's about creating a system that provides them to have the good help. So they're not doing all the stuff themselves, right? And I think physicians and healthcare providers also deal with the same thing. That's why there's so much burnout with nurses and doctors. There's a lot of not realizing also that you need to also take care of yourself and to receive it in different ways as well. So it's very similar. The problems are kind of intertwined. Anybody else want to add anything or spin anything off of
I just
that?
want to add one more thing to that. Like part of this burnout crisis among healthcare providers revolves around that lack of spirit, because that is when you're caring for a patient, when you are who is dying, very sick, when there is this moral injury that occurs, and that's a term that a lot of us in the field have felt, and it's being talked about now when we talk about burnout, but really feeling this disconnect in what you know needs to be done to properly care for someone, like to for them to heal, and not just heal but thrive, and what you're actually the limited resources that you have to offer that, and then that contributes to compassion fatigue and all of these things, right? So it really does, to me, if we're going upstream and we're looking at the issues here, we really need to start talking about spirituality and the lack of that among us as healthcare providers, and how disconnected we have become from spirit. And so again, asking these questions like, how do we care for others when we're disconnected, when we're burnt out?
You know, that idea of community that Indy mentioned a little bit earlier is so important. As a physician, the burnout happens because people feel, many people feel that they can't discuss the errors they made. And so they stay quiet about it. Any of you guys who have watched a patient die and wonder, what did I do wrong? Oh, I better not tell anyone because there might be like a consequence to it. There's a whistleblower that's going to say, oh, she didn't give the medicine at the right time or something. It's so hard to do everything perfectly in a hospital or a mainstream medical setting. And so doctors are oftentimes isolated, not just doctors, but all healthcare providers. I mean, real providers, not these corporate bullshit providers that are calling themselves providers these days, but the actual human providers. We are sometimes isolated. So when Indy was talking about communities, certainly in Northwest New Jersey, there's a very strong need for community, for people to actually come out and say, you know what, my crop failed last year. I might be, sitting on $2 million of land, but like right now, I can't make my payments for whatever, loans I have. And just to be able to sit in community and say, I'm not the successful farmer that I thought I was going to be, because nature in its cycles did this and I didn't know what to do. And to talk to other farmers who are sometimes competitors in that community, but especially in the small farms world, but to have abilities to talk to each other and find healing with each other. The other part I want to emphasize again is yoga. Yoga is one of the cheapest forms of healthcare if you can learn how to do poses, how to do breathing, how to do real yoga. Yoga, it means to yoke the mind with the body. And in Ayurveda, that yoking is first and foremost in getting your brain, your gut, your brain, your mind, your brain, your heart coordinated. And people think you have to spend $75 for, Lululemon yoga pants and $80 for a yoga mat and $25 for a class online. You just learn poses and do it on your own. It's such a great form of healthcare and wellness care. And if you can find, there's some really great yoga therapists in California. My favorite yoga therapist in the world lives in Pasadena, and she's fabulous for actual medical issues like rib fractures and sprains and irritable bowel syndrome and OCD and depression. And she uses yoga therapy, which has no pharmaceutical, dollar sign that you have to spend for, and people find themselves cured. So I want to just emphasize that those ancient remedies that humans came up with thousands of years ago still work today, and farmers can find that. And it's not just pharmaceutical pills that we need to be, gathering money for that's going to qualify as real healthcare. I think we need to redefine what real healthcare is.
Thank you, Dr. Bashwati. And I would add that yoga and yogurt together, it's like synergistically like takes it to a whole nother level, right? I mean, I don't know, you could do it at the same time. I don't know the Ayurvedic, complications with that is. So we only got a few more minutes. I would love for all of you to share like drop like a quick, I don't know. I'm like the question I want to pose to you is, what do you feel is like a healthy next step, collectively, individually? Also, please share, all of you, is there something that you guys are working on? Is there something that you're doing right now that's important that folks can stay connected to, or they can tune in about you? I know in the complementary space, I could talk about each one of you and all the awesome stuff, but I really want to open the space for you to share what your gift is that you want to share with this community. I'm also going to drop in the chat. I'm dropping a form. I'll also drop that in the scheduler for CAF. But this forum is a way for potentially us to keep this conversation going, whether it's continuing to virtually do it, or it's getting into physical spaces and coming together in different parts of California to have this conversation. Maybe it is going to a farm where we help out a small farmer, and then we also do a retreat with some sound baths and yoga and yogurt and good food and music. But we also come up with plans and ideas, and we invite local policymakers, and we invite insurance experts, and I don't know, like maybe that's where it starts, is us coming together in celebration and collaboration too. So please share your information, share your thoughts in that form. Who here wants to start first? You got 20, 30 seconds to go. All right, I'm gonna pick somebody. Okay,
I got you, Indy.
I'll go forward, John. Thank you.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to say earlier, but I got 30 seconds. So, farmers are wonderful people. You get to be outside a lot, and that is beautiful. I hope that you could take just a moment out of your day to just appreciate being outside. Being outside and being still. Not looking at the work that you have to do or that you have done, but just enjoying the outside, because that helps slow you down. That helps bring you back. It helps keep you centered. Helps your heart rate, your blood pressure, your just general well-being. So just, if you could just take a moment of your day to appreciate the fact that you're outside in the beautiful world, that can really help to land you and spring you forward.
Who's next? Rosie.
I guess I'm just gonna piggyback off of the mental health. I think just understanding when you are feeling down and not feeling the need to hide it, and being able to talk to someone that you love about it. And I dropped a link in the chat where I have a podcast where I go over yoga sequencing and meditations and sound, and all of these things I know are really healing. So yeah, just take care of yourself.
Charlie. Charlie.
I like to say, it's really community is super important. And going back to this idea that, you know, even in farming, right, we don't grow one crop, actually multiple crops works together. So, you know, really in kind of remembering that we're gathered today to have a conversation about healthcare and farming, you know, it's a whole bunch of different people from different modalities, different places, different backgrounds. And so this idea that all of us together can make this work, right? And it's not just putting ourselves in isolation, but actually now from the 3 years that we've been in isolation, actually coming back now and saying, hey, what community do we want to support that's going to support ourselves and what we want to see the world to be, right? Because I think right now it's a great opportunity to dream a new world. And so together, I'm really excited that all of us are here to really dream this new world for us tomorrow.
D or Bashwati, go for it.
There's a saying in Ayurveda that the change of the world around us happens with the change within ourselves. And people can find resources for themselves online today in a way we couldn't do 20 years ago. Some farmers may not be that savvy, but I know that most places have, you know, I mean, if you have a phone, which almost everyone seems to need these days, you can get online and do some reading, watch some YouTube videos on small farms and small farmers and what resources are out there. A lot of grants go unused in California. I was just reading online. They go unused because people don't know about them. Maybe advocate for someone you know who has a small farm and who needs, you know, a grant and help that happen. Go online and find resources. Also go online and find those forms of healthcare that several of us talked about today, whether it's, you know, acupuncture or good osteopathic manipulation or yoga or herbs. Find those forms of healthcare that are not the mainstream healthcare. The way we're going to fix the healthcare system is we're going to rebuild a new one. And nobody talks about it, but many of us are waiting for our own mainstream medical system to shut down, to get, you know, put out of business. The stats from COVID show that when people were unable to go to the mainstream medical, you know, hospital, clinic, and like those big super specialty centers, guess what? The number of deaths from many diseases went down. Isn't that interesting? Right? So maybe what we need to do is engage in forms of healthcare that are actually healthy and actually full of care rather than disease, profit-based management. And most of us who are doctors are not taught to talk that way. So I do talk that way because I went to med school to help my patients heal, not to help the pharmaceutical system heal. And so I really advocate for all of you who are here in the audience who are wondering, you know, what can I do next for myself? Find some of those forms of healthcare that are not the standard, but really are the standard. And thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you, Dr. Bashwati. And D.
Oh, that was so powerful. Thanks, Dr. B. Yeah, you know, what you said really connected for me. What I wanted to share was to really empower, you know, you all to reconnect to the plants and to connect to their spirits. Really, you know, they are here for us to support us. And that's just something really, whether it's through, you know, creating a ritual to make yourself a tea every night before you go to bed or in the morning to nourish you through the day, you know, very simple things, like just starting with these simple things. And for those of you with skills to offer, whether it's grant writing, whether it's you just want to learn farming or harvest, whether you're in a rural area or a city, because there are a lot of community gardens and urban farms popping up that need support as well. Like, connect with your local farmers, connect with these amazing projects that are happening, and see how you can be of service. And be curious and ask the farmers how you can help. If you do body work, if you're a massage therapist, like, how can you learn farming, like what Rosie was saying, you know, offering her skills to support the community in exchange to learn how to grow microgreens, right? Really simple things. Like, let's start to come back to these communities, that are energetic, creating these energetic exchanges outside of the currency that we currently operate under. The last thing I wanted to say, again, like with what's happening and the collective consciousness in our climate, all of the systems that are currently crumbling around us, it's an opportunity. And it is an opportunity, like, we said, to redefine what healthcare is for our bioregional area, because what works for someone in rural Kansas is going to be very different than Madera County, right? So really tapping into what your community needs and creating organization to advocate for each other. So that's about it. Be curious, connect with each other, and start to reclaim your health in this way. Thank
Oh
you so
man,
much for being here, guys.
thank you. And there's no more time for me, so I'll just leave you all with this one quote. This quote from George Washington. The dude, he was some important dude in the history of the United States. That this experiment that we're in, this social experiment. He said, "I'd rather be on my farm than be emperor of the world." And I'll just leave you all with that idea that the first president wanted to be on the farm. So thank you, everybody. Have a great the rest of your calf. Make sure you work out your calves while you do yoga too, right? Combination of things. Everybody, thank you. Thank you all the panelists. Really sending you all flow.